I'm not your slave. My wife said when I asked her to prepare a meal for my parents when they visited. I thought it was all a joke until she got angry when I insisted that she cooks us a meal. Then she further said, "Hire a cook. I didn't marry you to cook for you." So I ignored her. The next morning, I canceled her access to my bank cards. What happened next was unimaginable. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Samuel Russell from New York. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I've always been the kind of man who doesn't ask for much. A quiet home, some peace at the end of a long workday, and the kind of love that feels like a partnership, not a performance. I married my wife 3 years ago thinking we shared that vision, or at least something close to it. We had chemistry, sure. Fast-talking flirtation, quick weekend getaways, long phone calls that stretched past midnight when we first met. But looking back, I think I confused chemistry with compatibility. She was fiercely independent, and I admired that. Hell, I still do in some ways. But independence without compromise? That becomes something else entirely. So when my parents called to say they'd be in town for the weekend, I didn't think much of asking her to prepare a small meal. Nothing extravagant. Just something home-cooked to show a bit of hospitality. It wasn't a command, it was a request. A simple, human gesture. And yet, the way she looked at me, you would have thought I'd asked her to scrub the floors with a toothbrush. She didn't laugh. That was my first clue. I said it lightly, trying to keep it casual, with a smile even. "Think you could make dinner for Saturday night? Just something easy. Mom and Dad will be here around 6. Her response came quick, clipped, like she'd been waiting for the moment to let it fly. I'm not your slave. For words. For cold, dismissive words that cracked the air between us. I laughed, nervously, hoping it was some twisted attempt at humor. "Babe, come on," I said, stepping into the kitchen where she leaned against the counter, her arms folded. "It's just dinner. One night." She didn't budge, didn't soften. "Hire a cook," she shot back, shaking her head like I'd lost my mind. "I didn't marry you to cook for your parents. Or you." That's when I knew she wasn't joking. Her voice had that familiar edge, the one she used when she felt cornered, like she had to assert control to keep from feeling controlled. I stood there, stunned, not even angry yet, just confused. I didn't understand how a small ask had turned into a battle over freedom. That night, I lay in bed replaying the moment, trying to figure out when exactly we had drifted so far apart. She scrolled her phone beside me, headphones in, completely detached. I watched the blue light flicker across her face and wondered how I had become the enemy in my own home. My parents, for all their old-fashioned ways, were kind people. They'd never asked for more than a warm welcome and some conversation. They'd flown in to see us, to see her, too. I had wanted them to feel at home, to see that I had built something strong and lasting with the woman I loved. But now, I felt foolish for even believing we were on the same page. She wasn't rude to my parents, exactly, but there was a coldness in her, a withholding energy that made people shrink around her. And that night, as I turned my back to her and stared at the wall, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Not yet. Just a deep, quiet disappointment that settled in my bones like a winter draft. The next morning, I got up before her, made coffee, sat at the table, and checked my bank app like I always did. I watched the list of shared expenses, her gym membership, her hair appointments, her streaming services, even that wine subscription she never finished. I wasn't bitter, but I was tired. Tired of being expected to shoulder everything while being made to feel like asking for anything made me a dictator. So I did something I'd never done before. I removed her access to my cards. Not as a punishment, but as a message. If we were going to live like roommates, then let's live like roommates. Separate. Fair. That's what she wanted, right? Independence. I wanted to see if it held up when she had to carry her share. I didn't say a word. Just finished my coffee, slipped on a hoodie, and went out for a walk to clear my head. The air was crisp. Fall had finally arrived, and with it, a strange sense of clarity. I wasn't trying to hurt her, but I couldn't keep betraying myself to keep the peace. When I returned, She was already in the kitchen, tapping her phone with a puzzled look on her face. My Uber app won't go through, she muttered. Then she tried her Starbucks app. Same thing. She frowned, then looked up at me. Why are all my cards declining? Her tone wasn't angry yet, just confused. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, and looked her in the eye. I'm not your slave either, I said. I didn't marry you to pay all your bills. There was a long pause, the kind that makes your heartbeat echo in your ears. Her eyes narrowed, not with confusion now, but fury. She didn't yell. Not then. She just turned and walked out of the kitchen. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text. We need to talk. I want a divorce. And you know what? I felt nothing. Not fear. Not sorrow. Just relief. I wrote back, okay. And that was the beginning of the end. The silence between us the next morning wasn't the kind that healed anything. It was the kind that bruised. Heavy, weighted, full of all the things we didn't say but couldn't ignore. She moved around the house like a ghost, quick, deliberate, avoiding my eyes. I heard her upstairs zipping suitcases. Not packing to leave, not yet, but definitely sending a message. She wasn't bluffing, and I knew that. But neither was I. For once, I felt like I had stopped shrinking myself to keep the peace. And oddly, that gave me more energy than I'd felt in weeks. I made myself breakfast. Alone. Fried 2 eggs, some toast, poured a coffee, and didn't ask her if she wanted any. I didn't care if that seemed petty. For 3 years, I had poured into her, into us, and I was finally holding the line. The weirdest part? It didn't feel vindictive. It felt like survival. Around noon, she finally broke the silence. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through emails when she walked in and stood in the doorway. Her arms were crossed, her face unreadable. So, you really canceled everything? She asked, her voice flat, but edged with disbelief. Cards, apps, even the Amazon account. I nodded, barely looking up. Yeah, you made it clear you didn't want to play house. So, we're not playing house anymore. She laughed bitterly, one of those short, humorless laughs that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. You're punishing me because I wouldn't cook? I looked at her then. Really looked. No, I'm protecting myself from being taken for granted. There's a difference. That landed. I saw her jaw tighten. Wow, she said, shaking her head. You really think that makes you the victim here? I didn't respond. Because I wasn't playing the victim. I was just finally done playing the fool. She paced for a minute, chewing on her thoughts, then stopped. You know what? Fine. You want to play it like this? Let's call it what it is. You want control. You want a wife who jumps when you say so. I stood up slowly, not to intimidate her, but because I refused to be talked down to while sitting. No, I said evenly. I wanted a wife who had my back, who saw my parents not as a chore, but as part of my life. You made them feel like intruders, and you made me feel like a beggar in my own marriage. Her expression cracked, just a little. A flicker of recognition, maybe even guilt, but it vanished as quickly as it came. So you cut me off financially? She snapped. Because I wouldn't cook one damn meal? I took a breath, steadying myself. Because it wasn't about the meal. It was about how you looked at me when I asked. Like I was beneath you. We stood in that room like two people who used to know each other, now playing strangers in a performance neither of us wanted to admit was over. She opened her mouth to speak again, then stopped. Instead, she turned and walked away. A few minutes later, I heard the front door slam. I didn't follow her. I didn't text to ask where she was going. I didn't care. And that scared me more than anything else. Because when apathy replaces anger, the relationship is already dead. I sat back down on the couch, staring at the blank television screen, and realized something I hadn't let myself think before. Maybe we were never actually compatible. Maybe I fell for a version of her that only existed in the early months, before life asked anything of us beyond dates and Netflix. When things got real, when compromise became necessary, she chose herself every time. And now, I was finally choosing myself too. The hours dragged that afternoon. I tried to distract myself with work, laundry, even called my brother to vent a little, though I left out the worst parts. I wasn't ready to invite the world into my unraveling. But something about hearing his voice, his steady way of speaking, helped ground me. You've always been the giver, he said. It's okay to stop giving when someone's just taking. Simple words, but they hit hard. He didn't have to say more. I hung up feeling less alone, even if the house felt emptier than it ever had. Around dusk, I heard her car pull into the driveway. She came in without a word, didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge my presence. She went upstairs. I didn't follow. That night, we slept in the same bed, but might as well have been continents apart. At 3 in the morning, I woke up to the glow of her phone screen. She was typing something, her face tense and focused. I closed my eyes, pretending to be asleep. But when my phone buzzed 10 minutes later, I knew what it was. A text. From her. Even though we were feet apart. I opened it. I meant what I said. I want a divorce. I'll find a place this week. I stared at the screen, feeling strangely calm. No panic. No heartbreak. Just a quiet sense of inevitability. I typed back, okay. Let me know what you need to move out. She didn't reply. Just turned away from me in bed. And just like that, our marriage ended in silence. The day after her text about the divorce felt like a funeral, but not the kind with tears or sorrow. More like one of those sterile, awkward memorials where everyone's just waiting for the coffee to kick in. She left early that morning, barely brushing past me on her way out the door, like a ghost moving through walls. No makeup, hair tied in a lazy bun, hoodie that wasn't hers. She didn't say goodbye, and I didn't ask where she was going. I figured she was meeting with friends, maybe even hunting for apartments. I didn't care. Or I told myself I didn't. The truth sat deeper than that, sour and low in my stomach. There was a time when her absence would have made me anxious, made me wonder if I'd done something wrong. But now, I just felt the stillness. And I liked it. I sat on the back porch with my coffee, staring at the morning haze, wondering how long I had been pretending that we were okay. I got the first sign of retaliation that afternoon. A missed call, then 2. I didn't answer either. She finally left a voicemail, not the crying kind, not even angry, just sharp, clipped. I don't know what games you're playing, but my cards aren't working again. I couldn't even pay for my lunch today. Fix it. Then she hung up. No greeting, no name, as if I didn't know who it was, as if I hadn't spent the last 3 years watching her drift further into her own world, while mine kept shrinking around her silence. I replayed the voicemail once, just to hear the edge in her voice. It was laced with entitlement, not fear, not confusion, just the certainty that her lifestyle should remain uninterrupted, even as she packed her emotional bags and walked out of our marriage. That's what finally made me laugh. A bitter, hollow laugh that echoed in the empty kitchen. She was divorcing me, but still expected me to fund her exit. That evening, she came back around 7. She didn't even walk in the front door, just texted me from the car. Can we talk outside? I stood at the window for a few seconds, just staring at the message. My first instinct was to ignore it, to let her stew in whatever mess she'd built. But some stubborn part of me wanted to look her in the eye and watch her try to twist this into something that made her the victim. So I went out. She stood by the driver's door, arms crossed, like she was preparing for a job interview. Not a woman asking to salvage a marriage, but a tenant upset about her lease. Why are you doing this? She asked as soon as I stepped outside. No hello. No softness. Just a challenge. I leaned against the railing, arms crossed. Doing what exactly? She rolled her eyes. This game. Shutting off cards, locking me out of accounts. You know I don't have money sitting around. I let the silence stretch long enough to make her shift uncomfortably. You said you wanted out, I finally replied. I'm just giving you what you asked for. Independence. Her face tightened. Don't be smug. You know damn well I depended on those cards. I nodded. Yeah, and I depended on respect. Didn't get much of that either. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I could see the math happening in her head. For the first time, maybe, she realized that this wasn't a bluff. That I wasn't going to come crawling back, trying to fix what she'd already thrown in the trash. So that's it, she asked, her voice lower now. We just shut down everything like a business merger? I shrugged. You made it a transaction when you started treating love like labor. Like something beneath you. That got her. Her shoulders stiffened, and her face turned that defensive shade I'd seen so many times before, right before a fight. But there was no fight this time. Just silence. Long, thick, awkward silence. Then she turned to open her car door. You'll hear from my lawyers soon, she said without looking at me. I nodded once. Good. I'll be ready. She drove off without another word. The tail lights faded into the night, and with them, the last illusion that this marriage had anything left to save. I stood on the porch long after she was gone, just breathing. The air felt heavier, but clearer, too, like something had been scrubbed clean. I wasn't relieved yet, but I was steady, and that was enough for now. Inside, I found her last remaining belongings still scattered across the house. A half-empty bottle of designer lotion on the vanity. A drawer full of receipts I never looked at. The scent of her perfume still lingering in the hallway. I didn't touch any of it. Not yet. I needed the weight of it to remind me that I hadn't imagined the distance, the neglect, the subtle erosion of who we used to be. I sat on the edge of the bed, where we'd once talked about dreams, vacations, even kids. And all I could think about was how cold that bed had become. How long I'd been sleeping beside someone who had already left me in every way but physically. The next morning, I started separating finances like we were dividing assets for an estate. Canceled joint accounts, removed her as a beneficiary, switched out logins for anything tied to bills. It felt bureaucratic, cold, clinical, but necessary. There was no drama in it. Just closure. I forwarded some final invoices to her email. No message. No note. Just facts. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. I had already done that for years. This time, the silence was mine, and it was peaceful. She'd made it clear that love with conditions was the only kind she was capable of giving. And I was finally done paying interest on something that had long stopped being mutual. It didn't take long for the story to leak. I knew it would happen, of course. She was always deeply embedded in her group chats. Those digital huddles where people turned grievances into gospel. The first sign came 2 days after she left. My cousin Sarah texted me a screenshot from Instagram. A vague quote shared to my wife's story. Real men don't weaponize money when they don't get their way. No names, no context, but everyone who knew us knew what it meant. I stared at the screen, not surprised but still annoyed. It wasn't just passive-aggressive. It was dishonest. It framed her as a victim of financial control when the truth was far messier. She wanted freedom on someone else's dime. And when I stopped footing the bill, she spun the narrative like I had clipped her wings. What bothered me wasn't just the lie. It was how easily people were willing to believe it. By that evening, my phone was buzzing with calls and texts. Her sister, Shauna, called first, agitated, theatrical, as always. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she shouted the moment I answered. "You're cutting her off? She's living out of her car." That one almost made me laugh. She drives a leased BMW and works remote. "Stop with the dramatics," I said calmly. I didn't cut her off. I stopped paying for her hair appointments and wine club. That's not survival. It's luxury. But Shauna wasn't hearing it. "You embarrassed her. You humiliated her," she snapped. "She's crying nonstop. Do you even care?" I didn't answer that question because it was the wrong one. Caring isn't the same as enabling. And it damn sure isn't the same as going broke so someone else can look rich online. "Tell her to stop airing our business on social media," I said instead. Then I hung up. I didn't know Shauna my peace of mind. Not anymore. The next morning, I opened Facebook, against my better judgment, and saw a status from her mutual friend, Renee. Crazy how some men think a wife is just a live-in maid and still expect her to be grateful. The comments were brutal. Women I hadn't seen since our wedding were chiming in with fire emojis and say it louder replies. One even wrote, "She's better off without him. Sounds controlling as hell." And there it was. The smear campaign had begun. It was surreal watching your own life get dissected by people who only knew fragments. People who never saw the nights I stayed up late balancing our bills while she ordered DoorDash because she didn't feel like cooking. Or the weekends I drove 2 hours to visit her family while she made excuses not to see mine. I wanted to scream at the screen. "You weren't there. You don't know what really happened." But I didn't. Because no one wants truth. They want spectacle. It was Leah, her cousin, of all people, who finally reached out and said something that didn't make me want to throw my phone against the wall. She called me late that night, voice low, like she didn't want to be overheard. "Hey," she started. "I just want you to know, I don't believe all the stuff going around." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling for what felt like the first time that day. "Thanks. I appreciate that," I said. "You saw how things were between us. This didn't come out of nowhere. She was quiet for a second, then added, "Honestly, I always felt like she treated the marriage like a brand. Something that looked good online, but didn't mean much day to day. I love her, but she didn't seem present." That word, present, hit me harder than I expected. Because that's exactly what had been missing. Not just love, but attention. Intention. Her being there in more than just body. The days that followed were a strange blur. At work, I found myself slipping during meetings, zoning out mid-sentence, only to catch myself and mumble an apology. At night, I scrolled through her pages, not because I missed her, but because I couldn't look away from the unraveling image she was painting of me. Each post, each quote, each shared meme was a silent accusation. She never said my name, but every message was a bullet with my initials carved into it. I should have blocked her. I know that. But part of me needed to see just how far she was willing to take this. It was like watching a fire you started by accident, but now you're too fascinated to put it out. My brother, Marcus, came by unannounced that weekend. He walked in holding 2 beers and a face full of concern. "You look like hell," he said, handing me one. I nodded. "Feels about right." We sat on the porch, watching dusk settle over the neighborhood. I told him everything about the dinner argument, the finances, the texts, the social media. He didn't interrupt, just listened. When I finished, he leaned forward and said, "You did what you had to do. She treated you like an ATM. You said no. That doesn't make you the villain. It makes you a grown man with boundaries." I felt something inside me soften a little. It wasn't validation I needed, it was perspective. And Marcus gave me that without flinching. "Let people talk," he added. "They'll move on. They always do. But you? You've got to live with whatever choice you make now. Don't make it one you'll regret just because someone guilt you into fixing something that was already broken." That night, I deactivated my Facebook and muted her stories. I wasn't running. I was choosing silence over chaos. I couldn't stop her from rewriting history, but I didn't have to be an audience to it either. I started focusing on myself again. Small things. Laundry, grocery runs, cooking real meals. The kind I used to dream of sharing with a partner. But now, I made them for me. For once, I was the one being cared for, even if it was just by my own damn hands. And strangely, it felt like healing. We agreed to meet at a small cafe on the edge of downtown. Neutral ground, as her lawyer phrased it in the email. The place was one of those over-stylized coffee shops with concrete floors, exposed pipes, and baristas who wore beanies even in the middle of October. I arrived early, partly because I always did, and partly because I needed a few minutes to brace myself. The last time we were face to face, it felt like we were standing on opposite ends of a battlefield, both too proud to lay down our weapons. This time, I wasn't looking for reconciliation. I wanted clarity, maybe a sliver of understanding. Not for her, necessarily, but for myself. So I could walk away from this mess without wondering if I'd missed something obvious, something human, something real. She arrived 10 minutes late, like always, and walked in like she still belonged everywhere she went. Her outfit was calculated, casual enough to appear effortless, but with the sharp, styled edges of someone who expected to be noticed. She spotted me immediately, adjusted her purse strap, and made her way over without a smile. I stood up, out of habit, then sat back down. No hug, no small talk, just silence as she settled into the seat across from me. "Thanks for meeting," she said, her voice cool but not cold. I nodded. We had to do this eventually. A pause. Then she tilted her head slightly, like she was studying me for signs of weakness. "You look tired," she said. "So do you," I replied. And we sat there, 2 ex-lovers playing polite while our history buzzed under the surface like a live wire. The waiter came and went, leaving us with 2 coffees we barely touched. She stirred hers absently while I watched her, waiting for her to start. She always liked to control the tempo of our conversations, decide when and where the emotional punches landed. "I've talked to my lawyer," she finally said. "He says it should be straightforward. No kids, no house, just the finances." I nodded slowly. "Sounds right." She looked at me then, really looked, for what felt like the first time in months. "Why'd you do it like that?" she asked quietly, cutting off the cards. "The money." Without warning, I set my cup down, fingers wrapped around the warmth. "Because you made it clear you were done showing up. I just stopped funding the performance. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't interrupt. It wasn't about punishing you, I continued. It was about reminding myself I still existed, that I still mattered in a marriage that had become all take and no give. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. Defensive. Predictable. I was working. I was managing my own stress. You think I was just lounging around while you played the martyr? I exhaled, long and slow. No. I think you stopped trying. And I let you. Until I couldn't anymore. Her eyes narrowed, but there was no fire behind them this time. Just a slow burn of frustration, maybe even regret. So that dinner, asking me to cook for your parents, that was the hill you wanted to die on? She asked. No, I said. But it was the moment I realized I was already dead in your eyes. That you saw basic respect as servitude. That showing hospitality was beneath you. She scoffed. It wasn't about your parents. It was about control. I shook my head. No. It was about presence. About showing up. For me. For them. For this marriage. My voice cracked slightly on the last word, and I hated that it did. But I didn't take it back. We sat in silence for a while, the low hum of espresso machines and indie music filling the space between us. She stared out the window like she wanted to be anywhere else. I almost told her to leave. But then she spoke, softer now. Do you think we ever really liked each other? The question caught me off guard. Not loved. Not cared. Liked. It was honest, in a way neither of us had been in months. Maybe years. I thought about it, really thought about it. In the beginning, I said, yeah. I think we liked the idea of each other. You liked that I was stable. I liked that you were different. But once life stopped being shiny, we didn't know what to do with each other. She nodded slowly, eyes still on the window. I kept waiting for you to change, to stop expecting things from me. I blinked, and I kept waiting for you to want to give something without being asked. There it was. The whole damn problem summed up in 2 sentences. She wanted unconditional acceptance. I wanted mutual effort. And somewhere between those 2 wants, we lost each other. Maybe we never had each other to begin with. She turned back to face me. So what now? She asked. We split everything and just disappear? I shrugged. I think that's what divorce means. A flicker of emotion crossed her face. Loss, maybe, or the shadow of it. I don't hate you, she said. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't nothing either. I don't hate you either, I replied. And that was probably the most honest exchange we'd had since we said our vows. Before we parted, she reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope. The paperwork, she said. Look it over. I didn't ask for anything that wasn't fair. I took it, nodded. I'll get my lawyer to review it. We stood up at the same time, 2 people no longer tethered by hope or obligation. Just paperwork. She paused before walking away. I hope you find someone who wants to cook for your parents, she said, with a small, tired smile. I smiled back. I hope you find someone who doesn't expect you to be anything but exactly who you are. And with that, we walked in opposite directions. I didn't look back. It's strange how quiet the house feels when someone leaves, not just physically, but emotionally. 4 days after our final conversation, I kept expecting to hear her footsteps in the hallway or the sound of her favorite true crime podcast playing in the kitchen. Muscle memory, I guess. Your body remembers patterns even when your mind has moved on. I found myself reaching for a second coffee mug in the mornings, even though I knew it would sit untouched. I wasn't mourning her, not exactly. I was mourning the routine, the illusion, the shape of a life I had imagined but never actually lived. When she moved out for good, she took her clothes, her makeup, her books, and left behind a silence that was louder than any argument we'd ever had. The first weekend alone, I cooked. Not just scrambled eggs or takeout reheats, real meals. I made garlic butter chicken, roasted vegetables, and even tried baking bread from a YouTube tutorial that nearly set off the smoke alarm. It was messy, imperfect, but mine. There was something healing in that, in reclaiming the space, in turning the kitchen into something more than a battleground of expectations. I played old-school R&B, cracked a cold beer, and cooked like I had guests coming over, even though no one was. That night, I ate at the dining table alone for the first time in months. No phones, no arguments, just food I made for myself, from scratch, without guilt or resentment. And for the first time in a long time, I felt full, not just in my stomach, but in my chest. There was no applause, no one to impress. Just me. And that was enough. Her name still came up sometimes, mostly in hushed conversations or casual mentions. A mutual friend texted me out of the blue. Saw her at the gym. She looks different. I think she cut her hair. I responded with a thumbs up and nothing else. What was I supposed to say? That I missed the way her hair used to fall over her face when she was half asleep? That I used to brush it off her shoulder before kissing her neck on Sunday mornings? Maybe once that memory would have stung, but now, it just felt like a scene from a movie I didn't want to rewatch. The more time passed, the clearer it became. My marriage had ended long before the paperwork. We were just two people who ran out of reasons to pretend. A few weeks later, I ran into Marcus at a barbecue. He pulled me aside, cracked open a beer, and said, "You look lighter, man." I shrugged, grinning slightly. Probably lost 20 pounds of emotional debt. He laughed, but there was truth behind the joke. I told him about the cafe meeting, the way it ended, the weird civility of it all. "Sounds like closure," he said. I nodded. "Yeah, or something close to it." Then he looked at me, serious now. "You don't regret any of it?" That question stuck with me. Did I regret it? The marriage? The decision to walk away? There were moments, sure, but not regrets. Because even in the unraveling, I learned something valuable. I learned how far I would go to preserve peace, even if it meant losing myself. And I learned where the line was. And once it was crossed, I didn't look back. She never did make a public retraction. The quotes kept coming on her socials for a while. More vague shots, more curated sadness. Eventually, people stopped reacting. That's the thing about public sympathy. It has a short shelf life. Without new drama, the story dies. And as it faded, so did the narrative she had tried to control. Meanwhile, I kept my head down, rebuilt slowly. I updated my apartment. New curtains, fresh paint, a couch that didn't carry memories of Sunday night silences. I even started hosting small dinners again. Friends, cousins, coworkers. And when they sat around my table, eating meals I made from scratch, they always said the same thing. "You seem good." And for once, I believed them. But healing doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes, it creeps in quietly. Like the first night you sleep through without waking up in the middle of the night, heart racing. Or the morning you realize you haven't checked her Instagram in over a week. Healing showed up for me in a dozen small ways. Clean laundry folded on time, grocery lists I actually completed, Spotify playlists without hidden heartbreak songs. It didn't mean I was whole, but it meant I was getting there. And in a way, the ending had done what the relationship never could. It gave me back to myself. I think the worst part of any breakup isn't the moment it ends. It's the realization that the person you loved doesn't exist in the way you thought they did. That's what I sat with most. Not anger, not grief, but disillusionment. I had loved her potential, the idea of partnership, of building a life with someone who saw value in the small things, like cooking a meal, sharing a bed, showing up when it wasn't convenient. But what I got was someone who saw effort as oppression. And once I saw that clearly, there was no one seeing it. I wasn't perfect. I know that. I have my own flaws, my own triggers. But I showed up. I gave. I tried. And when I stopped being useful, I became disposable. The final paperwork came in the mail on a Thursday. I opened the envelope, signed where I needed to, and scanned through the terms. No drama. No surprises. Just signatures and stamps and silence. I didn't cry. Didn't pause. Just signed, sealed, and mailed it back. That night, I sat on the couch, turned off all the lights, and let the darkness settle in. Not as grief, but as release. I thought about the boy I used to be, the man I had become, and the one I was still learning to be. And I promised myself something simple but sacred. Never again would I beg someone to stay. Never again would I mistake convenience for connection. And never again would I allow love to become a transaction. If you've ever been made to feel guilty for asking the bare minimum, or if you've walked away from a relationship where your presence was treated like a burden, then this story is for you. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to choose your peace over someone else's pride? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this if it hits close to home. Your story matters, too. Let's talk about it. See you soon in the next one.